This is the MHS Pawdcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. I'm Itai Geller with Julia Hirschfield. Episode 15 of the school year. The spring is upon us. Vaccinations starting to roll out, so hopefully we have a brighter spring and summer ahead. We have 3 segments for you today. We'll first be joined by English teacher and student council advisor Miss Wagenblast to talk about all the events planned for the last couple months of the year, including an outdoor prom and some other plans for Battle of the Classes. Then Josh Hyman and I will talk about the upcoming spring sports season. All these teams didn't play last year, but they're ready to go after the 2-year wait. And finally, we'll be joined by Ashvin and Aravind from the Cleaning Up Metuchen organization to spotlight what they're doing and what they have planned this spring. But before that, here are the announcements from Julia Hirschfield.
Thank you, Eddie. The Footlighters production of Little Shop of Horrors will be taking place from Friday, April 23rd through Sunday, April 25th at 7 p.m. Performances can be seen virtually, and tickets are available online at mhsfootlighters.com. The junior-senior prom will be held outdoors at the Pines Manor on Thursday, May 27th from 6 to 11 p.m. Prom bids are $75 per person and are being sold at school on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays through the end of April. A flyer has been posted on the Metuchen High School website with information regarding scholarships that the district will be making available to the graduating seniors. All submissions are due May 3rd. Check under the news tab for more. Finally, on Friday, April 16th after school, the podcast and the MHS Media Club will be hosting an informational meeting for all students interested in joining the clubs in the fall. A link to the meeting is available on the school website. That's all for a busy week of announcements. Back to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Julia. And yes, just to add to that, we are having our informational meeting on Friday, April 16th, and we'd really like to see some people get involved. I'll be heading out, Julia, as well. We have a lot of seniors in the club, but we're going to be continuing things, so we'd love to see some more people get involved. But let's move into our first interview now, as Joe and I will talk to Miss Wagenblast. It has been a truly strange and unprecedented year at Metuchen High School, but as we approach the final months, plans are in place to make this spring as normal and enjoyable as possible for students. For more, it's great to be joined right now by MHS English teacher and student council advisor, Miss Wagenblast. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, of course, it's been a strange year. It's been a difficult year for the student council, especially just simply to get things going and to plan. But what have been some of the most difficult challenges and obstacles for the student council to overcome this year when it's come to planning events?
By far, I think the biggest challenge has just been communication, being able to communicate with the student body about various events. To the students' credit, the officers in particular, they have really made extensive use of social media this year, maybe even more so. I know that they communicate with each other via Snapchat and GroupMe and things like that. But from even just yesterday, we were selling prom bids and there was some miscommunication about different forms that had to be filled out. And I know that it's just a lot more difficult this year to get the word out, not being able to, have announcements in school and not being able to see people face to face. I would say that that's been the biggest challenge of all, for sure.
So the plans for the junior and senior prom are for next month. How will it be different from past years, and how can students buy prom bids?
So this year, the prom is on Thursday, May 27th. It's actually the same day as it usually is. It's usually the Thursday before Memorial Day. So that's the same, but it will be outdoors this year. That's one of the safety measures that we're taking because, there's a lot of the research that indicates just being outside is much safer. So Mr. Paragallo and I had talked about that, and we thought that was the best course of action. So it will be outdoors. The students will be underneath a tent. And so, that will just kind of be a different feel in and of itself. And then there are just minor changes. I mean, I guess a pretty significant one too is that students will need to be wearing masks except for when they're eating. So even if they're just sitting at their table, but they're not eating, when they're out on the dance floor, when they're taking pictures, all of that will include having to wear masks. And we are just reducing the number of people at each table from 12 down to 8, just to be able to space people out more. But other than that, we're hoping that everything will basically be the same. We've got a great DJ. The food will be the same as it usually is. And I think that when people get there, they'll still have a really great time. In terms of buying prom bids, you can buy your prom bid any Monday, Wednesday, or Friday for this entire month, all the way until the end of the month. And that's after school from 3 to 4 p.m. in the front foyer. I'll be sitting there at a table. And the most important thing, this was one of the things that was miscommunicated yesterday, was that every single student, whether they're an outside guest or a Metuchen High School student, has to fill out the form that delineates all of the COVID protocols. So that's just a parent signature. And then there's a separate form for if you have an outside guest. So those are all the details for buying the prom bids. Yesterday, we actually sold more than I thought we would. So I think we had a good start, and we'll be there for the rest of the month on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Great to hear. So let's shift gears a little towards another one of the big unifying traditions we seem to have, Battle of the Classes. And of course, typically that would be something that would be happening in the gym with everybody there. And because of COVID protocols, can't really do that. So are there any plans to orchestrate this event differently before the school year is over?
Yes. So Battle of the Classes is going to be on Friday, June 4th. That is, I guess, technically still a tentative date, but it looks like it's pretty much going to be on that day. It will be taking place outside this year on the football field. And the officers and I have already chosen some of the events we were able to keep the same. Things like the marshmallow and spaghetti tower we thought was safe enough for people to be able to do. We're going to do probably a modified version of tug of war, maybe with fewer people so they can space out a little bit more. But then some of the events that we actually ended up changing. And all I'll say right now is that one of the events is a pretty fun one involving water. So we kind of had the luxury of being outside, being able to be a little bit messier this year. And I think it's going to be exciting because there will be some old events that people are familiar with, but also some new ones that are new to the whole student body. So I'm really looking forward to that.
So what are some other unique fundraisers and stuff that the Student Council has conducted this year? And are there any other plans for the last couple months of school?
Yeah, so I think that kind of like what I was saying about the communication and how impressed I am that the officers have really stepped up and made themselves available to the student body and really have a presence among the student body. I have been really impressed with the fundraisers that they've managed to pull off this year. The senior class has had several very successful fundraisers where they took orders on Google Form and actually hand delivered baked goods to people's houses. The junior class had an enormously successful Krispy Kreme fundraiser where they raised almost $1,000 profit to help offset some of the extra costs for prom this year. The freshmen have had both a What's the Scoop and a Chipotle fundraiser. So I think it's great that freshmen, considering this is all new to them, and they're not even really here in the building, have managed to find ways to raise money. But the one that I would say I'm the most impressed with is the sophomore class, who conducted a fundraiser by raising money. And once they had hit different monetary thresholds, performed some kind of charitable act or some kind of humorous act. And they actually ended up getting some of the teachers involved. And all I'll say is that the final benchmark was the $600 benchmark. Their goal was to raise $600. They hit that benchmark. And if they did, that would result in a rap battle between Mrs. Wag and Mr. Giddis, also known as G-Funk. I'm just saying right now he's going down in flames. So you should all be ready for that because it's coming, all right? And in terms of the rest of the year, I think most people at this point are just focused on, the junior class is really focused on organizing prom, and everybody's kind of getting in Battle of the Classes mode now, working on lip sync, their t-shirts and things like that. So I think probably fundraising will take a back seat for the remainder of the year, and we'll just focus on that school spirit aspect and boosting morale and getting everybody to be excited about the last few events of the year.
Well, it's certainly been a challenging year, but it's great to see so many of the traditional events like Prom and Battle of the Classes will still be taking place even in different capacities. Ms. Wagenblast, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day and stay safe.
So when we come back, Josh Hyman and I will preview the spring sports season, and then we'll be joined by Aravind and Ashvin to talk about the Cleaning Up Metuchen Club. For Joe Stibich, I'm Itai Geller. This is the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS.
Having trouble seeing the board in class? Do you need safety glasses for your school sport? If you answered yes to either of these questions, head over to Optique Unique, the eyeglass store at 406 Main Street in Metuchen. Optique Unique does it all. Not only do they offer eyewear for all ages, they also sell sports-specific safety glasses for kids and adults. Call them at 732-321-2020. That's 732-321-2020, or visit OptiqueUnique.com. Do you want to build character, build confidence, or even build yourself? All that and more can be accomplished at the Black Belt Institute at 23 New Street, right here in Metuchen. Students of all ages have been able to learn respect, discipline, fitness, and self-defense from their experienced instructors for over 20 years. Whether you're an adult looking for stress reduction or know someone young who has interest in Taekwondo, the Black Belt Institute is the place to go. The Institute takes a fun approach at teaching the rules of self-defense, instilling in their students an I-can-do-it attitude. Interested in taking a class? Call them at 732-205-9797 or visit their website at blackbeltinst.com. Once again, that's 732-205-9797 or blackbeltinst.com. The Black Belt Institute, Metuchen's leader in martial arts and fitness.
Welcome back to the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. I'm Josh Hyman.
And I'm Itai Geller.
After a 2-year hiatus, spring sports are finally returning to action at MHS and across the Garden State this week. First, some winter sports like swimming and wrestling are currently concluding their seasons. How did they perform?
It was a really good season for swimming and for wrestling, and we'll also touch on cheerleading. Let's start with the swimmers. First of all, we alluded to it last show. It was great to see that they actually got to have some virtual competitions. They ended with 7, which, we didn't even know if they were going to get any meets at all. It was very different. We explained it last time about having officials at one pool with some swimmers and some swimmers at another, basically because New Jersey COVID guidelines made it impossible for schools to send more than 3 swimmers to one place at one time when you had referees and such. So it worked pretty well, and the teams both did really well. Both finished undefeated at 7-0. Bridget Thomas led the way for the girls. They had several girls qualify for all conference honors. As for the boys, Alan Ciara, senior, broke a school record in one of his forms of swimming. So congratulations to them. Great season. And hopefully next year they can get back in the pool normally. But of course, for all these seniors, because there's a lot of seniors in the class of 2021 who have been swimming. They've been swimming competitively with travel teams at the Y since they were really in elementary school. It's nice that they were able to cap things off at least with some sort of season. And the fact that they got 7 meets in and also did really well is a nice way to finish it off. Let's shift gears to wrestling. Another great year for Coach Kegel. They're 9-2 right now. There are only 2 losses against St. Joe's and St. Thomas. And let's be honest, it's impossible to beat either of those schools, it seems like in sports, but they're 9-0 against public schools this year. And they put up nice fights against both the Falcons and the Trojans. They're going to finish second for the second straight year in the GMC Blue Division. And they have 5 wrestlers who will be moving on to compete in the Super Regional tournament. So similar to basketball, there's no traditional GMC tournament for wrestling this year. Instead, it's just an individual competition. So it's not full teams. Certain wrestlers from certain classes are being sent to this to compete. But Metuchen has 5 wrestlers competing. This is the most they've had in over 20 years. So the program's continuing to grow, and it's not just seniors either. Sure, you've got seniors like Tyler Haynes and Kobe Williams and Brandon Kick, but also junior Jack McGowan and sophomore Fran Rossiter, all qualified to compete in that. Also a shout out to some of their heavyweights, a bunch of juniors, Marvin Milano, Kevin Stecker, Matt Bianchini, all had really good years, and they're going to have a lot of pressure on them next year. Coach Kegel, when I was talking to him, alluded to the biggest challenge is going to be recruiting some underclassmen. He knows the Metuchen Grapplers program is really strong here, but they're going to be losing a lot of seniors who have all been there since his first year as coach in Metuchen. So it's going to be tough, but for this year, great season for the boys once again, and it's nice to see this wrestling program continuing to grow. And speaking of programs that are on the rise, how about Metuchen Competitive Cheer? Second straight year, they win the state championship in the small school all music variety. Great year for the girls. with Coach Yoakum. They win it for the second consecutive year. Last year, they were able to overcome St. Thomas Aquinas. This year, they get it pretty easily. For the second consecutive year. And we know the cheerleading squads have been strong here. I remember back when we were both in elementary school, how some of the girls in our grade were going to Disney World, I believe back in 4th grade, for a travel competition in Florida for some of the best youth cheerleading programs associated with Pop Warner. Well, they're now all in high school and doing an excellent job winning the state championship for the second straight year. So congrats to them, and congrats to all these teams that do indoor sports, having a safe season, limited COVID, and great performances all in all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for some of these winter sports, such as wrestling and swimming, those were definitely the hardest to do under the restrictions. But, because of swimming, obviously the pool and contamination, it's an indoor space, along with wrestling. So the way they did these meets and these competitions and the tournaments, it's a really interesting and very creative, just the way they were able to pull it off and give these kids, some semblance of a regular season. And this really goes to show, the creativity that is required for these sports, the hard work, just the determination to make things happen. It's a perfect embodiment of the competition itself, because, how easy would it have been to just shut down the entire thing for a year and say, sorry, you'll have to wait next year. That would have been pretty easy, but they said no. They basically thought all of this up on the spot, really. And I think it's incredibly impressive to see how both the athletic conferences and the schools and everybody involved was able to make something happen. And both, swimming and wrestling even go a bit further to say that we basically expect excellence from them at this point. We always want to see kids get state times and, finals times, and we want to send kids to those really big tournaments such as wrestling. And another thing we wanted to, you mentioned it before, the, rec club to high school pipeline for these sports as well, because like you said, with swimmers, a lot of them have been swimming from a very young age, at MEY or MMP or other swimming clubs that, really get these kids ready for high level competition. And then on the other side with wrestling, you have the grapplers program, which has been around for a very long time in this town, actually, and has always had a great reputation and is churning out just superstar after superstar in wrestling for this high school team. And Coach Kegel has done a phenomenal job of capitalizing on that strong pipeline system. And for the cheer team as well, we have just phenomenal youth development programs in Metuchen, and they were already just national class athletes that are now competing at a high school level. So I think it's a really great system that we have in this town, where we're getting kids ready for those tough competitions in high school, because a lot of kids, they go freshman year and they expect to become very good, but they don't realize that it takes years and years of hard work and talent. And fortunately, the kids in these three programs have that in spades.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, also, you have to give credit to the NJSIAA. You knew they were in a high-pressure situation because they didn't have a spring season. And of course, you really can't blame them, because back then there was so much uncertainty. We really didn't know what to do with ourselves when the pandemic first came upon us. But there was a lot of concerns coming into the winter season. Could they get it done? Could they get through it? Would there be a lot of positive tests? There were some positive tests. I'm not going to discount that, but it wasn't nearly as many as people thought, even though Metuchen and New Jersey as a whole were dealing with a little bit of a spike, especially in the month of March with the pandemic, and it really wasn't hurt and harmed much more because of playing indoor sports. So credit to that. There was a lot of work. I remember being there for a couple of the wrestling matches, broadcasting and seeing how instead of, for example, having one mat, they had two and would be sanitizing the unused mat while a match was going on the other mat. So things like that, simple things really when you think about it, but that's how you really prepare for something like this. And they were able to get through this season. So kudos to them. And it's great that we got through this winter year indoors, and hopefully next winter, things will be much more normal.
Yeah, definitely. And switching up now, the baseball and softball teams will both look very different from when they were last on the field in 2019. What are some expectations for them this season?
Well, yeah, it's really hard to, preview things this season because we haven't seen these teams in action in 2 years. And with high school especially, we're only here for 4 years. So the rosters are completely different, especially for baseball and softball that have JV and varsity programs. So let's try to start here with baseball. they still have a pretty accomplished roster because they had a lot of underclassmen that were playing during that 2019 season. The most significant one, Matt Rowe, he's a solid hitter and can also toss it out there on the mound. And he's a Rutgers commit. That senior should be strong. Also, senior Jackson Fenner plays well in the outfield. And also keep an eye on junior Ian Lukaski. He, as a freshman, ended up starting a lot of games at catcher and proved to be a really solid battery mate for a lot of the starting pitchers in that Bulldog rotation. And Coach Janik has a lot of experience, longest tenured coach here in Metuchen other than Coach Holleran. So he's been around for a lot of it. He's also a Metuchen High School graduate, so he knows a lot when it comes to baseball, and he's got a lot of expertise. Now, my one concern with the baseball team going into the season, actually there's two. The first thing is they lost a lot of talent. You've got Jay Harry, for example, Gavin Abrams. They've both committed to Power 5 schools and graduated. Jay Harry is playing at Penn State, got a double in his first career game. Gavin Abrams ended up transferring after his junior year and is now playing in Clemson. So two big athletic schools. That's a lot of talent to replace, but the Metuchen team is resilient, and they're also coming off of a 13-9 season. But my other concern, and this is really just with baseball compared to any other sport, if you remember last summer, they had the Last Dance World Series, which was a competition that was carried out by a sanctioning body from Florida because the NJSIAA didn't really want to get involved with any spring sports. But it was in July, and there were, I think, 128 schools that fielded teams to compete on the baseball field. They had 4-team pods, and then they had single elimination playoffs for the top 16 teams, and it culminated with a championship in Lakewood, where the Lakewood Blue Claws minor league baseball team plays. But Metuchen did not participate in that. And a lot of other local schools, just naming a few, Island, Piscataway, Edison, they all participated in that. So the players got to have some synergy, even if it was just for 2 or 3 games. I think that can make a difference a little bit at the beginning of the season, but Metuchen really has to work on the preparation because, Josh, we have seen, for example, when we were doing basketball, that these teams, those first couple games can be really sloppy, just trying to figure things out. They haven't played in so long. And that was when it had only been 1 year. This is 2 years. So there's going to be a challenge there. As for softball, my main concern is that this is basically a new team. They are only going to be returning 2 players who were on that 2019 roster on the varsity level. Everybody else was a junior or senior then and has since graduated. So Annika Frick is going to have a big role there as a senior to really be a leader, not just in her playing style, but also kind of show her the way around for some of these underclassmen who are new to this. But there's a lot of talented underclassmen. Softball has really started to grow in Metuchen, and there's a lot of girls, specifically in the sophomore level, who have been playing softball for a long time at the traveling level. And like we just talked about with swimming, with wrestling, these schools, and also even with cheerleading, these teams that have youth programs recreationally in Metuchen that build from a young age tend to have success at the high school level. So you have a lot of these girls who have been involved with softball for a long time. I think they'll be well adjusted to move up to the high school level, especially since they've been playing softball at a traveling level over these past 2 years. It hasn't been a complete hiatus. They've still had some competition to kind of get suited up. But softball team last year, 2 years ago, rather, they went 10-11. They were 9-3 in the GMC, but out of conference went just 1-8, and also got knocked down the first round of the GMC tournament in an upset against JP Stevens. So some time to recover, but they also have a lot to figure out. So Coach Thomas is going to have a lot of work to do with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of these teams have really been hit hard by, graduating seniors and skipping a year, that very vital development time, especially for those underclassmen. But, like you said, these kids are usually, a lot of them at least, are either multi-sport athletes or full year athletes for their specific sport. And, like you said, a lot of these kids are already competing on these very competitive travel and club teams where they're still getting in that experience. They're still figuring out the game very well, and they're getting that very fast-paced, high-energy, high-competition experience. And like you said, the club teams did not shut down, or at least most of them did not shut down over the season. So, like you said, I'm not too concerned with this especially young softball team because a lot of them have the experience already, and a lot of them are ready to learn. And I think the seniors, such as Annika Frick, will be able to guide them into this season. And for the boys, Matt Rowe committing as a sophomore, I believe, to Rutgers, which is almost unheard of. He is incredibly talented, incredibly skilled. He has the experience. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to play in big games. And I think he will be very, very important for the development of this freshman class and of this sophomore class, which unfortunately did miss a year. So I think both of these teams, although they do have a bit of a setback in terms of losing a year, I think the experience will, for the most part, still be there. And I don't think they have anything to worry about coming into this season.
Yeah, don't underestimate that either. This is a highly commercialized sport, baseball is, and you get 2 athletes in the last 3 years to commit to Big Ten schools as underclassmen. That's a big deal, and that's really unheard of for such a small town like Metuchen, regardless of the sport. But let's transition a little. I know you're amped. The track season is getting started, and when we had Coach Holleran on the show back in February, he talked about how the winter season was really just going to be a tune-up and a training session for the spring. The spring is his favorite time of year, and you get so many events in, so much competition. The weather's nice, so many big meets. Of course, not all those meets are happening this year, but the winter, it was just a few small dual meets, I believe, that you guys had. Some of them were occurring at the high school, but now not just the running, we also see throwing is going to be coming back at a little bit of a higher capacity, the long jump, the pole vault, other traditional spring events. So what are we looking at heading into the spring track season for Metuchen?
Well, yeah, with the winter season, it was a bit limited in terms of competition. However, we were fortunate enough to get a few meets with at least 3 schools in. So that was good to kind of, shake everything off and wake up after a very long time of no spring sports in general. But I do think this track team is in a very good position. You have guys like Thomas Kwok and Jai Dreyer, who's committed to Amherst College for track. You have Matt Brown, who's committed to Catholic University for track, leading the charge, kind of prepping this underclass. You have, you just incredible senior class as well, which unfortunately did miss a year. You have guys like Brandon Sinclair running the 800, who was at one point nationally ranked for his age group. And you have the pole vaulters like Bailey Schaefer, Lucy Lee, that are ready to, rack up some points in important meets for this team. And you do have the throwing as well. Unfortunately, during the winter, all the meets scheduled did not have any throwing. So the bigger problem is that there are only 2 returning seniors this year, myself and Daniel Olson. So a lot of the throwing team is a bit underprepared. I don't want to say underprepared, I guess inexperienced a bit, but that is to be expected. We do have a few freshmen, a few sophomores and juniors that are able to bolster the ranks. But the biggest problem is that, the lack of returning seniors and returning juniors and the very low numbers, actually. So, for the throwing team, especially in the spring, we usually get, like maybe 15 to 20 guys. We have like 8. We have 8 right now, which is a huge problem. Because, it's hard to get a relay together and it's hard to get, a lot of experience. But the good thing is that now with COVID restrictions, they're actually restricting the throwing relays from 3 guys, which was traditionally what it is, to 2 guys now. So that lack of experience is a bit mitigated. But the good thing is that a lot of the kids have been learning very well, especially, a new senior such as Lauren Anderson, who has been working very hard and learning very quickly, and freshman Ryan Timko, who has gone from never holding a shot in his life to throwing very well in his freshman season. So, it's a lot to look forward to in terms of the throwing team. And, we get to expect a lot of good things returning from this running team. We have a few college commits going out there, and we have very strong underclass, such as Theo Gerlach, who is almost to sub 5-minute miles as a freshman, which is nearly unheard of. So in terms of the running, in terms of throwing, there are a lot of things to look forward to with this track team.
Yeah, it's great to hear. And just overall, I think we also tend to underestimate sometimes how a lot of these sports, and the outdoor sports are no exception, that you're without some of those athletes. There are still some people who don't feel comfortable playing right now, at least until they get their vaccination. And I completely understand that, and we all do, but that's been another hurdle that these teams have had to overcome. And you mentioned the low numbers on the throwing team, and that's certainly not the only sport that's in that case. But these teams have had to adapt, and has really given an opportunity for some of these underclassmen to maybe get inserted into big moments. Maybe they're not ready yet, but maybe that experience down the line could make them better athletes heading into their upperclassmen years.
Yeah, so switching it over now, the Metuchen golf program has been quite successful these past few years. What can we look forward to, from the boys and the girls teams this spring, and who's going to lead the way for this golf team?
Well, the first thing I want to mention with golf, which is really good, that unlike almost any other sport, it's really not been halted for you to be able to practice golf. You can go to Topgolf, you go to a driving range and just get your swing in and get some practice in. And you've really been able to do that for almost the entire pandemic. It's also one of the lowest risk sports, so they can feel confident in that. But once again, not having that experience last year playing, being 2 years, especially for the golfers who haven't actually played a round of golf and have just been going to the driving range, if some of them are actually inserted into Coach Stoner's lineup, that's going to be a challenge heading in. But starting with the boys, they were led by some underclassmen back in 2019. Nico Malamug, of course, is now going to be a senior. Brothers Joshua and Kyle Blum were also really good for them that year. So if they're all golfing this season, they could help lead the way. They went 12-2. The boys golf team is always really solid here, and I think we can expect more of the same. As for the girls, they went 5-5, but I'm expecting them to be on the rise this season because they did not have many upperclassmen in 2018 or 2019 when they hovered around the 500 mark. Now they will. They'll have seniors Sophie DeCoit and Stella Weitzner, along with junior Ari DeSantis. Just a few of these upperclassmen that will lead the way and have some experience playing out there. So I think we could have a good year for both the boys and girls golf teams.
Yeah, definitely. They are in a unique spot in which they have been able to continue practicing throughout all the shutdowns last year. But obviously, going out to the driving range is a lot different than actually, navigating a golf course and playing a normal round of golf. But hopefully, we can see that, hopefully that extra practice does pay off and does translate into actual, competitions. And like you said, Nico Malamug is incredibly experienced and highly skilled. He's definitely able to lead this team no problem, as well as, being bolstered by juniors and sophomores that will definitely be able to fill his ranks once he's gone. And especially the girls team as well. Yes, they did not have the greatest record last year, but they are returning with very experienced players. So I think we can definitely expect good things from this team. Like I said, they have been set back a bit by the pandemic. Definitely not as much as other sports, especially ones like track or wrestling. So I think there's good news on the horizon for both of these golf teams. So finally, the boys tennis team returns to action next week. What can we expect from them, and how will Coach Thomas's previous experience coaching during the pandemic this fall and winter help them succeed?
Let's start with the latter part of that question. It's really valuable. The fact that he has that experience coaching girls tennis in the fall, swimming in the winter. He knows what it takes. He understands these guidelines. There's not going to be much of a learning curve, and he can kind of, let his players know that, and they can be pretty prepared compared to these other teams where for everybody, it's just one step at a time trying to navigate through these pandemic seasons. So that experience, not just, he's been a coach here for so long here in Metuchen, coaching 3 sports, but that's really going to be helpful. But as for the team themselves, this is another sport like golf. Tennis is low risk. You can spread out. I mean, I've been going with my friends to play tennis pretty often over at Oakland Park where they practice throughout this pandemic. It's a pretty easy way to exercise, and also it's a pretty safe way to gather and to get exercise in general. So as for the team itself, obviously, this is another team that I think is going to have some upperclassmen to help lead the way. In fact, they've had a lot of seniors that have joined the team just recently. Now, I don't know how many of them will actually be competing when it comes towards their first matches in the next couple of weeks, but that provides a nice support group. And just having more bodies there so that there's replacements if necessary, or just overall to support teammates, I think is really great to have. Other people I'm looking for, a couple of juniors who showed off on their freshman years 2 years ago. Matthew Byrne and Ricard Halverson really did a good job when they were back in their freshman year, and really impressed as the tennis team was 6-9 that season and picked up some key wins and a couple of upset victories. So I think they'll help lead the way, but I think the tennis team could be in for a great year, just like all these other spring sports teams. But that'll wrap up this segment. For Josh Hyman, I'm Kalegi. Let's move into our final segment of the day, where Itai and I will be interviewing Ashvin and Aravind from the Cleaning Up Metuchen organization.
Continuing here on the MHS Pawdcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High, I'm Itai Geller with Kalegi. There's a new teen volunteer organization that has just recently been launched in the Brainy Borough called Cleaning Up Metuchen. To spotlight what it is and what they'll be doing, it's a pleasure to talk to the group's leaders, sophomores Ashvin, Trehan, and Aravind, Sriram. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us, Itai. So, start off, just to sum up what we have is, we started this organization, Aravind and I, with some of our other friends, because we saw a need in the town to sort of clean up and work to pick up litter in the town, because we've seen how damaging the effects of litter can be, and we didn't have anything in Metuchen, so we were really motivated to start this. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm just curious about getting the word out, because we've talked to various clubs this year and it's been difficult, being at home, and it's been difficult to get the word out to students since so many people are not in school. So how did you go about launching this organization and recruiting members, and how have you fared with that so far?
Yeah, so definitely in the pandemic, it's been really hard to sort of get the word out. You can't put up flyers in school. There's not many people there. So the first thing that we thought about was social media, because that's what a lot of people spend their time on nowadays, and most teenagers have it, and that's sort of our target audience. So the way we went about starting this was first us four, Aravind and I, and our friends Armin and Anthony. When we started this, we wanted to make it accessible to all. So Instagram just popped up in our mind. So we created an Instagram account and started following people from Metuchen who would most likely be interested in the club. And it was tough at the beginning to get more people, but as some people started joining, they started telling their friends, and their friends started telling their other friends. And then in the end, at our first meeting, we ended up with 15 people, which we were really happy about. And we definitely know there are more people out there, so we're just trying to get the word out as much as we can.
So what are the specific community involvements and volunteering opportunities that you are planning to have this group take part in this spring?
I can take this one. So as of right now, our main focus would be collecting litter and probably making it like a better haven for wildlife and people in general, and for their pets and such. We have future ideas to connect ourselves with the Borough of Metuchen and the Metuchen National Honors Academy. Shoot. I forgot their name. Yes, just to certify our hours.
Well, that's great. So, because we know there's so many people who need those community service hours, not only for underclassmen who just need it for various organizations, but also for those who are involved in National Honor Society. It can be really appealing to upperclassmen who are in need of those hours. So I wanted to ask, what are some of the long-term goals going forwards for this club?
So short term, right now we're focused just on the meetings, but long term, we really want to have like a connection with the towns next to us. So Metuchen, it's a really small town, but sort of Edison, a lot of our wildlife areas combine with each other. So sort of we want to get something set up with students not only in Metuchen, but in Edison as well. So that way we can have as many people as possible, and we could work together on larger projects such as Roosevelt Park, which is actually a really big project, and that's in Edison. So we're going to need a lot of members to help clean that up. So right now we're just in Metuchen, but in the future we plan to expand to future towns, and that'll really help us achieve our goals.
Okay, so last question to wrap things up here. So why should people join this club, and how can they join the club?
So people should join this club because there are a lot of other environmental organizations out there. And I know that personally I'm a part of a few other ones, such as the Metuchen High School Sustainability Club. But the difference between us and them is that we want to focus on hands-on work and actually like having a boots on the ground approach. And other clubs just don't have that. So through our club, we really want people who are motivated to actually get out there and do the work right now. So right now we're recruiting primarily through Instagram and like talking to people. But currently the way to join our club is in our Instagram bio, that is at Cleaning Up Metuchen. We have a group me link and we're planning some events in the future. So if anyone wants to join, that group me link is the way to join. And in the future, we will have a website up. And right now, all the information is going through the public through our Instagram, but remember to check back later and we'll have a website link up there to facilitate with helping understand what our organization is all about. So Aravind, do you have anything to add?
No, that mostly covered it. Just focused on people who want to do hands-on work rather than conceptualizing. Yeah, mostly it.
Well, yeah, and that's really important too, because you mentioned it. There's so many organizations out there where they'll just come up with some ideas or suggestions of how you can help the community, and they'll be hesitant to actually do it themselves. And the fact that you guys really want to get involved and you have clear targets, because there's so many environmental areas, even though we're in central Jersey in a suburban area, we know about all these various things we have. We have some real national treasures just moments away and some great natural elements in Middlesex County that we can certainly help to clean up and keep our environment safe. So wishing you two best of luck going forwards with the club, and thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you again for having us.
All right, so that'll just about wrap up today's show. A thank you to Aravind and Ashvin for joining us, along with Miss Wagenblast, and of course our co-hosts Josh Hyman, Itai Geller, Julia Hirschfield, and Joe Stibich. Until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi. This is the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS.